Carved into stone at the edge of this bridge is a boast that it will stand forever. That inscription is 1900 years old, and in that time, this bridge has been deliberately blown up, burned or torn apart by human hands at least 5 separate times, in 5 different wars, spread across 7 centuries. Floods never took it down. Earthquakes never took it down. 2,000 years of brutal weather never took it down. People just couldn't leave it alone. In 98 AD, the Roman Emperor Trajan ordered a bridge built over the Tagus River in what's now western Spain. The job went to a military engineer named Caius Julius Lacer. Construction ran from 104 to 106 AD, just 2 years for one of the most ambitious bridges the Roman world had ever attempted. That timing wasn't a coincidence. 106 AD was also the year Trajan finished crushing Dacia, on the far side of the empire, thousands of kilometers away. He'd just earned 2 new titles for it, Germanicus, Dassicus, and both are carved right into this bridge's triumphal arch, fresh off the battlefield. This wasn't just a river crossing. It was a monument to an emperor at the absolute height of his power, stamped onto a corner of Spain he might never have personally visited. Trajan himself was born in Hispania, in a city not far from here, so in a strange way, this bridge sits closer to the emperor's own roots than most of the monuments built in his name back in Rome. Rome itself didn't even pay for it. It was funded by 11 local Lusitanian towns, all of whose names are still carved into the bridge's central arch. It had a real job to do, connecting Norba, now the Spanish city of Cáceres, to Conímbriga, in modern Portugal, as part of a much larger road, the Via de la Plata, that moved legions, olive oil, wheat, and administrators across the roughest terrain in the province. Before this bridge, crossing the Tagus here meant a slow, dangerous ford or a ferry at the mercy of the current. A permanent stone crossing turned a multi-day bottleneck into a controlled, defensible checkpoint, which is exactly why, centuries later, so many different armies would find it worth fighting over. Lacer built it from massive blocks of local granite, cut and fitted together with zero mortar, locked in place purely with iron clamps. The blocks were cut so precisely that they hold themselves in place under nothing but their own weight. No glue, no filler, nothing but physics and extremely good stonework. 6 arches, deliberately unequal in size, each pier anchored straight into solid bedrock rather than the riverbed itself, so the current couldn't slowly undermine the foundations. The largest single span stretches nearly 29 meters. Still the biggest arch span of any Roman bridge on the entire Iberian Peninsula. Stand underneath it today, and the scale is hard to process. The roadway sits roughly 50 meters above the water. The gorge itself is narrow enough that the Tagus River runs fast and deep through it, which is exactly why Lacer chose this spot in the first place. A narrower channel meant less total bridge, and bedrock close enough to the surface on both banks to anchor real foundations into solid stone instead of loose river silt. This wasn't the only bridge Trajan's engineers were building around this time, either. His reign is remembered as one of the most ambitious building periods in Roman history. Roads, aqueducts, forums, and bridges stretching from Britain to the edge of Mesopotamia. Alcántara was one entry in a very long list. It's just the one that's still standing almost exactly where it was built. When it was finished, Lacer commissioned one more thing, a small temple at the bridge's edge, where he was later buried. On it, an inscription in his own words, roughly translated, "I have built a bridge that will remain through the ages of the world, forever." He wasn't the only one impressed with himself. 400 years later, a 12th century Muslim geographer named Al-Idrisi wrote about the bridge and called it one of the wonders of the world. Bold claims tend to get tested. This one was about to be over and over again. Here's the thing. The engineering held. The mortarless, iron-clamped granite blocks flex slightly with heat and cold, which is exactly why the bridge survived 2,000 years of brutal temperature swings on the Spanish plateau without a single crack from weather. Floods never took it. Earthquakes never took it. In 1900 years, nature never once brought down an arch. People did. Over and over and over again. In 1214, during the Reconquista, the centuries-long Christian campaign to retake Spain from Muslim rule, Moorish forces destroyed the bridge's smallest arch to slow down an advancing Christian army under Alfonso IX of Leon. It sat broken for 329 years. Nobody had the money or the will to fix it properly until 1543, when Charles V finally ordered a permanent repair, using stone hauled from the exact same Roman quarry 4.5 centuries later. Think about that gap for a second. For over 3 centuries, anyone crossing the Tagus at Alcántara had to find another way around. A bridge boasting it would last forever, sitting broken and impassable for longer than the entire history of the United States. In 1648, during a war between Spain and Portugal fighting over Portuguese independence, part of a 5th arch was damaged. Then in 1760, during a brief border conflict nicknamed the Fantastic War, Spanish forces blew up an arch themselves, on purpose, specifically to stop a Portuguese army from crossing into Spanish territory. It was repaired 2 years later, in 1762, under King Charles III. Notice the pattern here. This same one arch near the northwest bank keeps getting singled out. It's the easiest one to reach quickly, and the easiest one to deny an enemy. Convenient geography turned it into the bridge's most fought over few meters of stone for the next 250 years. Then, in 1809, during the Peninsular War, the brutal, years-long fight to push Napoleon's armies out of Spain and Portugal, British and Allied troops under the Duke of Wellington destroyed that same arch again. This time, the goal was to stop a French army under Marshal Victor from crossing and reinforcing their position. Same arch, 3rd time. Different war, different century, different flag doing the blowing up. A temporary wooden span went up in 1818 to patch the gap. It lasted 18 years. In 1836, during Spain's First Carlist War, a civil war fought over who had the right to the Spanish throne, that wooden span was deliberately burned to stop one faction's troops from crossing. 5 wars, 5 destructions, 1 bridge, standing directly in the path of history again and again for over 1,700 years. By the 1850s, Spain finally committed to a permanent fix instead of another patch job. Between 1856 and 1860, under Queen Isabella II, an engineer named Alejandro Millan led a full reconstruction of the damaged arches, parapets, and triumphal arch at a cost of roughly 1.7 million reals. But here's the detail almost nobody mentions when they talk about this bridge. Millan didn't rebuild it Lacer's way. Lacer's original technique was mortarless, dry stone held together by precision and iron clamps alone. 19th century engineers, for all their advances, didn't fully replicate that method. Millan's repair used mortared masonry instead. It's a completely different structural philosophy patched directly onto the original Roman core. So the bridge standing today isn't one continuous 2,000-year-old structure. It's part ancient dry stone genius and part Victorian-era repair job, fused together at seams most visitors walk straight past without ever noticing. Mortar seems like the more modern, more reliable choice, but mortar cracks under exactly the kind of thermal stress Lacer's dry stone method was built to absorb. The old technique wasn't primitive. It was arguably better suited to the job than the fix that replaced it. More changes followed, decades later. In 1969, engineers drained the Tagus River entirely to build the nearby Alcántara Dam, exposing the riverbed for the first time in living memory. That's when they discovered one of the central piers had been quietly undermined by centuries of current, slowly eating away at the base where nobody could see it. They reinforced the foundations while the riverbed was finally dry enough to work on. And then, in October 2025, after roughly 1900 years of continuous use, a new modern road bridge finally opened nearby, and regular vehicle traffic was taken off the Roman bridge for good. For almost 2 millennia, cars, carts, soldiers, and pilgrims crossed a bridge built before the concept of a temporary structure even existed. It didn't stop carrying traffic because it wore out. It stopped because we finally built something else to replace it, which brings us back to Lacer's boast. Was he right? In one sense, yes. Not a single original arch has ever failed from age, weather, or structural flaw. Every collapse in 1900 years was caused by a person on purpose in a war. In another sense, no. The bridge he built and the bridge you can walk across today aren't quite the same object anymore. Roughly a third of it, arch by arch, is somebody else's repair, built in a different century with a different technique entirely. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Lacer didn't build something indestructible. Nobody can. What he built was something worth rebuilding, again and again, by people who refused to let it disappear, even when they were the ones who broke it in the first place. 1900 years later, the bridge is still there, still crossable on foot, still carrying Lacer's name carved into the temple where his body has rested since the 2nd century, next to an emperor's freshest, proudest military titles. Forever turned out to mean something a little different than he probably intended. Not untouched, not unbroken, just never ever abandoned. Every generation that inherited a broken bridge had a choice. Let the river win, or go find a quarry and start cutting stone. For 1900 years, straight through Reconquista, empire, invasion, and civil war, somebody always chose the second option. Next time, we leave Roman engineering behind entirely and head to a Persian palace so wealthy it took 20,000 mules and 5,000 camels just to carry off its treasure, right before it burned to the ground in a single night. Subscribe so you don't miss it.